I knew the axe was coming when Julian, our new 34-year-old chief executive officer, who genuinely believes that corporate synergy is a personality trait, decided to replace the mahogany conference table with a communal beanbag circle. You cannot negotiate complex freight contracts with a Romanian trucking syndicate while sitting on a neon green sack that sounds like it is passing gas every single time you shift your weight. But I did not think he would actually pull the trigger on me. I am the head of National Inventory Operations. I am the reason the toilets flush and the lights turn on in 570 warehouses across the Midwest. I am the reason our shelves are not stocked with rat poison instead of baby formula. On that afternoon, I sat across from Julian in his transparency aquarium, a glass office that smelled of sandalwood and unjustified confidence. He was wearing a vest made of recycled water bottles, organic linen trousers, and a smile that did not reach his dead, shark-like eyes. He clasped his hands together like he was about to lead a group prayer circle for quarterly earnings. He looked at me with an expression of profound pity. "Gerald," he said, his voice dripping with that toxic positivity that makes my stomach turn. "We have been doing a deep dive into the company's chakras, and well, your energy, it is very legacy system. It is dense. It does not flow with the agile liquid manifesto we are pivoting toward." I stared at him. I could feel the pack of cigarettes in my pocket calling my name like a siren. "You are releasing me because of my chakras, Julian? I balanced an $18 million variance in the City Hub last week while you were at a silent retreat in New Mexico." "It is not firing," he corrected, waving a hand in the air. "It is a release. We are releasing you to find a tribe that resonates with your specific frequency. Your vibe just does not match the future of global logistics." I looked at the clock on the wall. It was exactly 2:35 in the afternoon. The daily inventory hard sync, the digital heartbeat of this entire logistics empire, was scheduled to run its handshake protocol at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It required a biometric signature. My biometric signature. Without it, the system does not just pause. It assumes a security breach and locks down the database like a fortress during an apocalypse. "My vibe," I repeated, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. "Okay, Julian, you are the boss. You want liquid energy? You got it." I stood up. I did not scream. I did not throw the expensive succulent on his desk through the glass wall. I just reached into my pocket, pulled out my security badge, the one with the clearance level higher than his, and slid it across the reclaimed wood desk. "You have 25 minutes, I said, my voice as flat as a tire on a gravel road. Julian blinked, confused. 25 minutes to what? "Clear your desk? Take your time, Gerald. We want this transition to be holistic. 25 minutes before the ghost in the machine realizes I am gone," I said, turning toward the door. "You see, Julian, that legacy system you hate so much is held together by duct tape, 3 lines of code written in 1994, and my personal override. If I do not authenticate the 3 o'clock sync, the servers assume the company has been hostilely taken over. They sever the connection to the lenders. They freeze the shipping manifests. The trucks stop. The forklifts lock." He laughed, a nervous, dry sound. "You are bluffing. The tech team assured me everything is cloud native now." "The tech team?" I scoffed, pausing with my hand on the door handle. "You mean the 4 guys you hired because they had cool tattoos and lied on their resumes about knowing obsolete code?" "Good luck with that. Tell your lenders I said good luck." I stepped out into the hallway, leaving him in his glass aquarium. I walked past the open plan office, past rows of terrified employees. I felt a cold satisfaction. He wanted a vibe check. I was about to give him a seismic event. The elevator ride down took 55 seconds, enough time to replay 13 years of missed birthdays and nights spent sleeping on a warehouse cot in Detroit because a blizzard knocked out the power. I gave this company my youth. I gave them my health. My knees click like a counter every time it rains because I spent the winter of 2014 walking concrete floors to manually verify inventory when the scanners went down. And for what? To be told my vibe was off by a guy whose hardest day of work involved choosing between oat milk and almond milk for his latte. I walked past the security desk. Barney was there, the only other person in this building who knew the difference between a pallet jack and a jackass. "Leaving early, Gerald?" Barney asked, looking up from his crossword puzzle. "Permanent vacation, Barney," I said. Stopping to fish the visitor pass out of my pocket, I realized I still had the company credit card. I tossed it on his desk. Julian's idea. Apparently, my presence is bad for the corporate alignment, Barney snorted. That boy wouldn't know real work if it bit him in the leg. You take care of yourself. This place is going to fall apart without you. That is the plan, I muttered, pushing through the revolving doors and into the humid, exhaust-filled air of the city street. The moment I stepped onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. It was a short, sharp vibration, followed by a long pause. The panic pattern of our server alert system. It was exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The digital heartbeat had stopped. I stood on the sidewalk, the city noise humming around me as I lit a cigarette. I know it is a filthy habit, but when you spend your life inhaling diesel fumes and forklift exhaust, a little tobacco feels like fresh mountain air. I took a deep drag and watched the smoke curl up toward the glass tower from which I had just been evicted. Up there on the 45th floor, I knew the silence was breaking. The dashboard of truth, a massive monitor Julian had installed in the main lobby to show real-time profits, was currently flashing red. Not a soft, aesthetic coral red, but a harsh, warning crimson. My phone buzzed in my pocket again and again. It was the operations group chat, a forum I had been removed from 15 minutes ago, but apparently the system had not updated the permissions yet. Gordon, the vice president of operations, wrote, "Why is the city distribution center showing zero inventory?" Deanna from Human Resources chimed in, "Is this a glitch? The dashboard says we have negative stock." Julian, the chief executive officer, typed, "Who has the override code Gerald just left? Someone call him." I smirked, exhaling a cloud of gray smoke. The override code was not a number you wrote on a sticky note. It was a sequence of decisions based on variable logic that lived entirely in my brain. It was knowing that the scanner in Bay 7 of the Ohio hub always reads double on Tuesdays because of the sun glare, and you have to manually deduct 15%. It was knowing that the emergency stop on the server was not a physical button, but a command line script I wrote in 2009 called "Do Not Touch." They did not just fire an employee, they deleted the operating system. I walked to my car, a reliable dented sedan that had survived more road salt than a pretzel factory, and threw my bag into the passenger seat. I was not going home to cry. I had one more stop to make, a stop that would ensure this bridge did not just burn, but was completely dismantled. I keyed the ignition, and the engine purred. My phone was vibrating so hard on the center console that it was slowly moving toward the edge. Incoming call. Julian, I let it ring. Let them sweat. Let them feel the vibe of absolute, unmitigated panic. I put the car in drive and merged into traffic on Interstate 80. The chaos was just beginning, and I had a front row seat to the collapse. You have to understand that a logistics network is like a living organism. It breathes, it eats, and it disposes of waste. If you cut the nerve connection between the brain and the body, things get messy very quickly. While I was driving along the highway humming to an old rock song on the radio, the digital nerve center of our global logistics firm was suffering a massive stroke. Here is what Julian did not understand. The legacy system was not just counting boxes. It was a translator. It took the messy data from our ancient conveyor belts and translated it into the shiny numbers the banks like to see. Without my authorization code, which ran a script scrubbing that raw data, the systems defaulted to safe mode to prevent theft. In safe mode, it marked everything as quarantined. At 3:15 in the afternoon, a sales representative in Chicago tried to process an order for 6,500 units of high-end consumer electronics. He would have typed in the code, hit enter, and watched the screen blink with an error message. "Zero stock available." "That is impossible," he would have shouted, spilling his coffee. "I saw 3 pallets on the dock this morning." He checked the system again. Stock location unknown. Status lost. Now multiply that by 570 warehouses. My phone was silent now because I had put it on Do Not Disturb. However, my car's Bluetooth display was still showing the text alerts. Brenda, the warehouse manager in Iowa, texted Gerald, "The scanners are locked. The drivers are backed up to the gate. They are getting angry. One of them has a tire iron. Where are you?" My heart twinged for Brenda. She was good people. She made a killer potato salad and did not deserve this. But collateral damage was unavoidable in a revolution. I mentally apologized to Brenda and kept driving. The real problem was not the trucks, though. It was the money. The company operated on a revolving credit line. The lenders had an automated system, a nasty algorithm that pinged our inventory levels every hour to ensure we had enough collateral to cover our loans. If the inventory dropped below a certain threshold, the credit line froze automatically. At 3:30 in the afternoon, the inventory did not just drop, it vanished. According to the computer, our global logistics firm was now a company that owned absolutely nothing but some leased office furniture and a lot of expensive bean bags. I imagined Julian standing in the middle of the chaos, his vest unzipped, sweat staining the armpits of his organic cotton shirt. The agile team he had hired, boys who looked like they should be playing video games rather than managing spreadsheets, would be frantically typing on keyboards that were no longer connected to anything that mattered. Reboot it, Julian would be screaming. Just turn it off and on again. But you cannot reboot a vacuum. You cannot reboot a void. I was heading out of the city now, the skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror. The air was getting cleaner, the roads emptier. I was driving toward the only person who could appreciate the sheer artistic beauty of this disaster. I reached for my water bottle and took a sip. It tasted like freedom and vengeance, but mostly vengeance. The scary part was that I had not even unleashed the worst of it yet. The kill switch was not just about hiding the inventory. It was about the routing. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the automated dispatch system updates the global positioning system for every truck in the fleet. If the inventory is 0, the system assumes the trucks are empty. It tells them to return to base. Thousands of trucks halfway to their destinations were about to pull U-turns on highways across the country. Deliveries of medicine, food, and crucial manufacturing parts were all turning around because a computer thought they were hauling air. The radio announcer came on. Traffic alert. Major congestion building up on all arteries leading into the industrial district. Avoid the area if you can. I turned the volume up. Music to my ears, I whispered. By 4:15 in the afternoon, the glass office at headquarters had likely turned into a pit of despair. I knew exactly what was happening because I knew who Julian had hired to replace my team. He had fired my lead system administrator, Bruce, who was not much to look at but could code in assembly language while asleep. In his place, Julian hired a digital nomad named Dustin, who lists Disruptor as a skill on his resume. Here is the thing about Dustin. He thinks the cloud is magic. He thinks if something breaks, you just launch a new digital server. But our system was not in the cloud. It was on a physical mainframe in the basement of a building in New Jersey that flooded every time a storm hit the East Coast. I could picture Dustin right now, his hair bun unraveling as he panicked. He was probably frantically sending messages to the company group chat, begging for someone to explain the database setup. He even started searching public forums for instructions on how to reboot a legacy database from 1994, but there was nothing online. The database code was entirely custom, written by me. The interface is not responding. Dustin would be shouting, tapping on his thin laptop. I cannot push the emergency fix. Why is it not responding? Julian would demand, his voice cracking, because there is no interface. Someone from accounting, probably old Martha, would yell from the back. Gerald built a bridge using a custom macro and a prayer, and he took the prayer with him. My phone lit up again. This time a voicemail notification popped up. I tapped play through the car speakers. Gerald, this is Julian. Look, there seems to be a hiccup, a small misalignment of the data spheres. We need that password now. This is not funny. If you do not call me back in 10 minutes, I am contacting our legal department. You cannot hold company property hostage. Company property. I laughed out loud, startling a cow in a pasture I was passing. Honey, that property is a complicated system I spent 13 years memorizing. You cannot sue me for my memories. Besides, they did not even own the legal rights to the system. Under the Federal Copyright Act, specifically Title 17, Section 106 of the United States Code, those custom validation scripts and macro bridges were created on my own time, on my personal computer, in 1994, before I signed any formal employment contract. My lawyer friend had warned me years ago that without a signed intellectual property assignment agreement specifically covering that period, I retained the copyrights. I had only granted the company an implied, non-exclusive license to use them. By terminating my employment, they had automatically revoked that license. They were currently using my copyrighted work without authorization, making them liable for federal copyright infringement. The irony was delicious. For years, I begged them for a budget to upgrade. I wrote proposal after proposal, risk assessment, catastrophic failure imminent without system migration. Julian had used those proposals as coasters. He told me I was being resistant to change. Well, how is that for change, Julian? The scramble back at headquarters would be shifting from technical to physical. The operations leads would be flooding the conference rooms, printing out spreadsheets from last month, trying to manually reconcile stock. It was 2026, and they were probably looking for fax machines. Does anyone know how the system actually works? Someone would shout, and the silence that followed that question would be deafening. That silence was my resume. That silence was the ghost of every weekend I worked for free. That silence was the void left by every thank you they never said. I pulled off the highway onto a gravel road. The trees were dense here, shielding the world from the chaos I had left behind. The reception was spotty, but a text from an unknown number managed to squeeze through. Lenders just froze the credit line, the message read. Trucks are turning around. Julian is crying in the bathroom. What did you do? I did not recognize the number, but the tone sounded like Bruce. Good old Bruce. He was probably monitoring the internal communications just to watch the fire. I did not reply. I just kept driving up the winding path toward the lake. The engine clicked and cooled as I parked next to a vintage pickup truck. I was not just driving to a house. I was driving to the past. The man who started it all, the man who actually knew what a pallet jack was, lived here. Howard's cabin was a fortress made of cedar and stone, overlooking a lake that looked like a sheet of hammered steel. Howard Hampton had founded Global Logistics 35 years ago with one truck and a bad back. He retired 6 years ago, handing the keys to his son, Julian, with the explicit instruction, "Don't touch the operations. Let Gerald run the engine. You just polish the hood." Howard was on the porch, whittling a stick. He looked like a retired lumberjack who had decided to wear flannel for the rest of his days. He looked up as I approached, his eyes narrowing under bushy white brows. "You were supposed to be in the afternoon meeting," he rumbled, his voice sounding like gravel tumbling in a dryer. I was released, I said, leaning against the porch railing. My vibe did not match the future vision. Howard's knife stopped moving. He looked at me, then at the stick, then back at me. "Your vibe?" My energy was too dense, Howard. I was blocking the flow. Howard slowly set the knife down. He did not explode. Howard never exploded. He imploded, creating a vacuum that sucked the oxygen out of the room. "Julian fired you on a Thursday? Before the hard sink?" "He released me," I corrected. "Gave me 25 minutes to clear out." So I cleared out, and so did my authentication protocol. Howard closed his eyes. He did the math instantly. He knew the system better than anyone except me. He knew about the credit lines, the truck routing, and the phantom inventory. "The lenders?" he asked softly. "Frozen," I said, "as of about 35 minutes ago. The trucks?" "Turning around. U-turns on the interstate. It is probably on the news by now." We stood there in silence for a moment. I could hear the wind rustling through the pine trees. Howard looked out over the water, his expression unreadable. He was remembering the early days when we spent 18 hours a day in a drafty garage, handwriting logistics logs, because we could not afford computers. We built this company from nothing. Howard let out a long, slow breath. He reached for the bottle of bourbon sitting on the table next to him and poured 2 glasses. No ice. He slid one across the table to me. "You warned him?" I told him he had 25 minutes. And he asked me if I wanted to take a mindfulness pause. Howard took a sip of the bourbon. He stared out at the lake. "I built that company with sweat and blood. I missed my daughter's graduation to secure our hubs. I missed my wife's birthday to fix the routing." He turned to look at me, his eyes hard. "And he fired the mechanic because he did not like the grease on his hands." Howard pulled a satellite phone out of his pocket. It was the only thing that worked out here reliably. "Who are you calling?" I asked, taking a drink. The burn was pleasant. "The chairman of the board," Howard said, punching in a number. And then the bank. He put the phone to his ear. "Thomas, it is Howard. Shut up and listen." My son is an idiot. He just severed the brainstem of the company. No, do not talk to him. He does not know what is happening. Pull the audit logs. Look for the termination of user Gerald admin root. Yeah, that is the one. When you see the timestamps, you are going to want to pour yourself a drink. He paused, listening to the shouting on the other end. Fix it? Howard laughed, a dark, terrifying sound. I cannot fix it. You cannot fix it. There is only one person on this planet who can fix it, and he is currently drinking my best bourbon and watching the sunset. You better hope he is in a negotiating mood. He hung up and looked at me, a small, grim smile on his lips. The board wants an emergency session, Howard said. They are going to patch us in use? You think I am doing this without you? Howard stood up, his knees cracking. You are the asset, Gerald. Today, you are the most valuable asset in the portfolio. The price just went up. He walked inside to the landline, a rotary phone that sat on a desk made of solid oak. It was the only phone he trusted for serious business. I followed him. The sun was dipping below the tree line, casting long, bloody shadows across the cabin floor. The silence out here was peaceful, but I could hear the phantom screams of Julian's career dying in the distance. The phone rang. It was a shrill, mechanical sound. Howard picked it up. Speak. He listened for a moment, his face stone cold. Then he looked at me and winked. No, Julian is not invited to this call, Howard said into the receiver. Put him in the waiting room. We are talking about adults now. He put the phone on speaker. Gerald, are you there? It was Thomas, the chairman. I am here, Thomas, I said, my voice steady. Just enjoying the vibe, the speakerphone crackled. I could hear the tension in the boardroom hundreds of miles away as they shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Gerald, Thomas said, his voice trying to be desperate. We need to resolve this immediately. The lenders are threatening to call the loans. We are bleeding cash by the second. That sounds stressful, Thomas, I said, leaning against Howard's desk. But I do not work for Global Logistics anymore. I was released, remember? Yes, we know. Another board member chimed in. A misunderstanding. Julian acted prematurely. Julian acted like an idiot. Howard cut in, his voice booming. You want the system back up? You need Gerald. He is the only one with the biometric root access. The tech team you hired is trying to use a crowbar on a digital lock. If they force it, they wipe the database permanently. Excellence. They knew it was true. What do you want, Gerald? Thomas asked. First, I said, counting on my fingers. I do not come back as an employee. I come back as an external consultant. My rate is triple my old salary, billed hourly, with a minimum retainer of 6 months paid up front, Thomas said immediately. Second, I continued, complete autonomy over operations, no vibe checks, no beanbags, no agile sprints. I hire my old team back, Bruce, Brenda, all of them. With a 25% raise and an apology letter signed by the board. That is highly irregular, Thomas stammered. The human resources policies. The trucks are stopped, Thomas, I reminded him. Do you want to talk about human resources policies, or do you want the fleet moving? Fine. Agreed. Third, I said, taking a breath. Julian is removed from the operational chain of command. He is not allowed to contact me. He stays in his glass office until you find a replacement. There was a pause, but Howard's voice cut through it. Do it, Thomas, Howard warned. Or I will sell my shares tomorrow and tank the stock so hard it will be delisted by lunch. Okay. Thomas yielded. We will restructure his role. Good, I said. Draft the contract. Send it to Howard's fax machine. When can you be here? Thomas asked. I am 4 hours away, I said. System stays down until I walk through those doors. Can you not give us the code over the phone? Thomas pleaded. Thomas, I said, my vibe really needs to be present to facilitate the energy transfer. Isn't that right? I hung up. Howard laughed, pouring me another bourbon. At 9 o'clock in the evening, I pulled up to the tower. The building was fully lit. We walked into the lobby. Barney was still at the security desk. When he saw me, he stood up and saluted. Welcome back, sir, Barney said, grinning. We took the elevator up to the top floor. On the 45th floor, the office was crowded with board members and lawyers. In the corner, sitting on a beanbag, was Julian. He looked rough. His vest was unbuttoned and his hair was messy. The contract is signed, Thomas said, thrusting a paper at me. The wire transfer is cleared. Please, Gerald, fix it. I did not say a word. I walked past them straight to my old desk. I plugged my laptop into the hard line. I opened the terminal. The screen was a wall of red error text. System lockdown, authentication required. I typed in my username, typed in my password, and placed my thumb on the scanner, biometric confirmed, initiating sync. Reconciling inventory. Restoring credit lines, the screen turned from red to green, flashing a success notification. It took exactly 55 seconds. The room let out a collective breath. Phones started ringing immediately as the systems came back online. I stood up and closed the laptop. Inventory is live, I said. Trucks will receive updated routing in 5 minutes. Lenders will see the assets within 8. I looked at Julian. He was staring at the floor, picking at a loose thread on his vest. One more thing, I said to the room. My team Bruce and Brenda will be back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I want their desks back. I want the bean bags gone, and I want a coffee machine that dispenses actual caffeine. Whatever you want, Thomas said. Just keep it running. The meeting broke up. Julian was standing in the doorway of his office, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. I did not know, he whispered. I did not know the system was that dependent on you. That is the problem, Julian, I said. You saw the machine, but you did not see the mechanic. You thought you could run a freight train on good intentions and spiritual vibes. Is my dad going to fire me? He asked, his eyes wet. I do not know, I lied. But I do know one thing. I stepped closer to him and smiled. Vibe check, I whispered. I turned and walked away. Outside, the night air was cool. I got into my car and drove to the nearest diner. All units were back en route, proceeding to their destinations. The voices of the drivers, the warehouse workers, the people who actually move the world were back online. I ordered a steak and a black coffee. I sat there alone, checking my phone. The retainer had hit my account. Legacies last. Vibes, they just evaporate.